Hello, welcome to Learnovative Agile and Scrum video series. Our vision is to make learning special. These videos will help you to understand the concepts through simple and easy ways and boost your knowledge and confidence to apply these concepts at your workplace effectively. My name is Vijay Bandaru. I'm a certified Scrum trainer, certified Agile and leadership coach. I conduct Scrum Alliance certification workshops and also help organizations in their Agile transformation journey. In this video, we're going to focus on how to track a Scrum project by taking something called as sprint Burndown at the sprint level tracking and release Burnup at the overall project level tracking. Before going to the actual discussion, we will be looking at how a traditional project is typically tracked. So we usually have a Microsoft project plan, which is planned for maybe next up to 6 months to 9 months or overall project duration. And the way we track the progress is typically based on milestones. So that means analysis phase is done, maybe 20 to 25% of the progress, and design is done, another 15 to 20% is done, coding is done, up to 50% done. So something similar to that we track. There are a couple of challenges with this way of tracking, the traditional approach. Time is the enemy of transparency. That is the first challenge. What does it mean? The longer time you take to deliver anything, the lesser the transparency it will have. So if you keenly observe the way we are following in the traditional approach, until the testing or UAT, all your project status reports will be green color because there is no quantifiable work coming out. So that's why all your reports will be showing fine as status update. But once the testing or UAT starts, probably the problem will start, everything will become red. That is what is called time is the enemy of transparency. And also this way is output based tracking instead of outcome based tracking. So let's discuss what is about value based tracking. Let's discuss a couple of the Agile Manifesto principles here. The first principle in Agile Manifesto is our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. When you're delivering valuable software, you also have to focus on tracking based on value instead of something else. And the principle number 7, working software is the primary measure of progress. That means, as we just discussed, the traditional way of tracking the progress is based on the output. But here, we need to show the progress or track the progress based on working software, which is value. And there's one more principle, Agile principle number 8, talks about sustainable pace. So sustainable pace or sustainable development helps you to be predictable. So one way of tracking the sustainable development is based on the value that the team is creating at the end of every sprint, and look at are they sustainable or not, so that they can become predictable. And also a portion from the Scrum guide here, which is talking about how to monitor the progress of the project. So have a quick read of this statement. This is talking about the overall project progress can be tracked by the product owner based on the work completed at the sprint level. So typically the sprint level progress is tracked by the development team, and the overall project level progress is tracked through the product owner. There are multiple ways to track: Burnup chart, Burndown chart, or cumulative flow diagram. These are all different ways to track. Scrum does not mandate or insist all these things because Scrum is a framework. So in this example, we are going to discuss sprint Burndown to track the sprint level work and release Burnup to track the overall project work. It's not mandatory that at the sprint level you have to use only Burndown, release level Burnup. You can use Burnup, Burndown for both sprint level as well as release level, or sprint level Burndown, release level Burnup, or sprint level Burnup, release level Burnup, Burndown or Burnup, anything is okay. So let's look at sprint level tracking. So as we discussed, the development team tracks the sprint level progress. So burn down represents the work remaining against the time. Here the time is sprint duration. So the x-axis is the sprint duration. Let's say if your team is working in a 2-week sprints, then the x-axis will have day 1 to day 10. And y-axis contains the work remaining. So typically teams follow something called a story point estimation. There may be different estimation techniques, but most of the times teams follow story point estimation, which is called relative sizing, based on 3 parameter: complexity, uncertainty, and volume of work involved. The team will assign a number to each backlog item. So that represents story point. So here in this example, we are taking 25 story points as the cumulative work pulled into the sprint. In Scrum, the development team decides how much work can be pulled into the sprint. So this 25 is a cumulative amount of work for the number of items selected. It can be 3 or 5 or 7, any number, but cumulative size is the 25 points based on the complexity, uncertainty, and amount of work done to be done. So the green dotted line here is indicating the ideal progress. That means if everything goes as per plan, the 25 will become 0 by the end of day 10. So let's say the work has begun. Now the team has selected first item on day 2, which is worth of 3 story points. So the work remaining at the end of day 2 is 25 minus 3, which is 22. And they started working on the second item. Let's say the second item is completed on day 4, which is again 3 points. So work remaining at the end of day 4 is 22 minus 3, 19. So day 6 they completed another item which is worth of 5 points. So 19 minus 5 is 14. Again day 8 they have completed one more item which is worth of 8 points. So 14 minus 8 is 6. Day 9 they have completed one more item which is 5 points. Maybe in that case 6 minus 5 is 1. So day 10 the last item they have completed which is 1 point. So in this example the red line started at 25 and slowly coming down based on the work completed, and finally it is touching the x-axis and it is becoming 0. So in this case the velocity of the team is 25 story points. Velocity is nothing but the cumulative story points completed at the end of the sprint. When I say completed, the items that are meeting the definition of done. So let us look at different variants of sprint burn down. So in this example, the x-axis is the remaining sprint time, the number of days, and the y-axis is the remaining work, story points, total cumulative story points of the selected items. And the green dotted line is the ideal line. And in this case, let's say the team has started working and they are completing in this approach according to the red line. By the end of the sprint, the red line is not touching the x-axis. That means some amount of work is not done. In that case, the amount of work, whatever number of items, backlog items are not meeting the definition of done by the end of the sprint, will go back to the product backlog at appropriate place. The product owner will decide if they are really important, valuable, urgent, then the product owner keeps them in the top of the product backlog and they may come to the next sprint. But in this example, they were not able to complete all the work they have selected into the sprint. Some items, maybe 1 or 2 items or 3 items, according to their story points, the number of items that are not completed, you can find. Let's take another example. So remaining sprint time is x-axis and y-axis usually the remaining work, and the ideal line is a green dotted line. In this case, the team is completing little ahead of time. So if you look at the red line, it is coming below the green dotted line, which represents they are ahead. In the previous example, the red line is coming above the green dotted line. That means they are behind. If the red line is coming in and around the green dotted line, that means they are on track. So that is how the transparency is provided to the development team during the sprint, and they can effectively plan and work the remaining work. So in this case, they completed all the items selected little bit before the sprint time box expires. So they may call the product owner and they can pull maybe 1 or 2 items, small items, which they can finish in the remaining time. Let's say they have selected one more item. So depending upon the size of the selected item, the story points, the red line is going straight up. So let's say they have selected an item which is 2 story points worth. In that case, the red line will go up by 2 story points. And they started working on that, and by the end of the sprint, if the team is able to complete the newly selected item, the red line will come and touch the x-axis and becomes 0. That means in this example, the team was able to did little more than what they have selected into the sprint at the sprint planning. So let's take a different example. X-axis is same, remaining sprint time, y-axis is same, remaining work, and the green dotted line represents the ideal progress. And let's say in this case, same as second one, they are able to complete little faster, and they have completed the work little ahead, and they have called the product owner and they choose little more work. But in this case, they were not able to complete the selected items, newly selected items by the end of the sprint. So that means instead of touching the red line, the x-axis, it is going straight horizontally. That means that represents the newly selected item or items are not meeting the definition of done. So these are possible ways. And you may ask a question, why are we tracking based on the story points? Why can't we track based on the number of items selected? The problem with tracking based on the number of items selected into the sprint, let's say top 2 to 3 items are simple and easiest ways which will be completed in early. In that case, the burndown shows false progress. What if the remaining 3 to 4 items are the complex and takes longer, which shows a false progress as if you are running faster. So tracking based on the number of items is not a good idea. And why are we not tracking based on the effort hours? That also has a problem. The problem is every day in the development team, they spend some time on the project. So they log 6 to 8 hours into the tools like Jira. So typically the burn down, as and when somebody completes 8 hours or 6 hours, the burn down comes down. But by looking at the burn down based on effort hours, you cannot know how much work is completed. That is why tracking based on the number of hours or effort hours is also not a good idea. So the way we are tracking here is based on the story points, because each item, depending upon the complexity, uncertainty and volume of work, each item may have different size. So we are tracking based on the cumulative size, and we are updating the burn down as and when an item is completing. That means when it is meeting the definition of done. So it shows a clear progress. And how frequently this should be updated? Typically or usually, as and when an item is completed, when it meets the definition of done, it has to be updated on the burn down. Or at least at the end of every day, to show the progress and to maintain the transparency, it has to be updated. So these are possible ways of sprint tracking based on the burn down chart. Now let us look at overall progress tracking. Here the product owner is responsible to track the overall progress, and a tool called release Burnup is used, and release Burnup is updated at the end of every sprint, and based on the progress the product owner may have to take scope versus time trade-off decisions. So let's take a simple example. In this release Burnup chart, the x-axis contains the number of sprints according to your release plan. In the previous example where we have just seen the sprint level progress based on the burn down, the x-axis is the number of days within a sprint. Here in the release Burnup, number of sprints in a release according to the release plan. That's the only difference. But both are representing the time. Y-axis again the same, work remaining. Let's say in this example, there are 150 story points worth of items, backlog items, are targeted to complete in 7 sprints. and the team is working. First sprint they completed 22 story point worth of items. So 22, green line is coming from 0 to 22. Let's say second sprint also they completed some work which is 25 story points. So cumulative 22 plus 25 is to 47. And let's say in sprint 2 review we have received some feedback, and the high level estimate for that feedback, let's say for example it is 15 points. Now the overall work is increased to 165 when we started 150 based on the feedback received 165. Now at this point of time, sprint 3, the team has also completed sprint 3 and which is 20 story points. So cumulative will become 67. That means first sprint 22, second sprint 25, third sprint 20. So together overall work completed so far is 67. Now if product owner wants to know how are we doing according to the current situation at the end of sprint 3, the remaining work can be calculated based on the red line and green line. So 165 minus 67. And remaining time is calculated based on the number of sprints remaining on the x-axis. So far we completed 3 sprints. So out of 7 sprints, 3 completed. So remaining 4 sprints. Now to calculate the how many more sprints required for the remaining scope. So total remaining work is 98 story points, which is 165 minus 67. And out of the 3 sprints, we can see the best velocity is 25 story points, the worst velocity is 20 story points, and average velocity is 22 story points. Now by having this, you can simply calculate using the best velocity to complete remaining work, which is 98 story points divided by 25, which is less than 4 sprints. That means which is a good condition. We have in hand 4 sprints, but we really need only less than 4 sprints. So which is good. And with worst velocity, which is 20, in that case 5 sprints we need, little close to 5 sprints. That means whereas we have only 4 sprints remaining, we need 5 sprints. That means we need more time than planned. Same as average velocity also. So average velocity is 22 story points. So 98 divided by 22, 4.5 sprints, whereas we have only 4 sprints. So depending upon this information, product owner can easily make scope versus time trade-off decisions. So what is important? Scope is important. In that case, he may request to have 1 more sprint, or time is a constraint. In that case, in the backlog, he can reduce one or two items which are low value. So it will be helpful for the product owner from the beginning itself. If you remember the traditional way of working, the project progress tracking, we were doing based on milestones. The transparency is less. But here in this, from the first sprint itself, the product owner can easily identify whether the remaining work can be done in the remaining number of sprints, which is time, according to the release plan or not. And accordingly, update the stakeholders and make the scope versus time trade-off decisions. So this is overall progress tracking. And do you know Brooks' law? Brooks' law talks about when you try to add more human resources to a project which is about to miss the deadline, it will take even more time. It cannot be on track. So there was a person called Fred Brooks. He has done almost his lifetime research, and he has written a book called The Mythical Man Month. In that he has identified this statement. The moment you are identifying a project that is missing the deadline or the timeline, at that point of time, if you try to add more human resources to the project, it cannot bring the project on track. So if you look back in a waterfall project, we typically know that we are about to miss the timeline during the last phases, which are testing or user acceptance test. At that point of time, if you try to put more people, it may not bring the project on track. But in Scrum project, using this release burnup chart, from the first sprint itself, you can clearly identify whether the remaining scope can be done in the remaining time, which is number of sprints, or not. And accordingly, you can make right decisions as a product owner. So in this video, we have just discussed how to track the sprint level progress, and the development team is responsible. They can use sprint burn down chart, and release level or overall project level progress, the product owner is responsible, and he can use burn up chart to track that and to make the decisions by contacting the stakeholders and development team. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it is useful. I will create many more short videos of Agile and Scrum concepts and upload to our YouTube channel. So please subscribe to our channel to get latest updates of our upcoming future videos. Please also like this video if you have found it useful. Also, please use the below contact information to reach out to us for your training or coaching or transformation needs. Thank you so very much.